now my great privilege to introduce today's speakers. In 1998, two young Stanford grads had an idea. They wanted to organize the world's information. The company they formed went on to become one of the biggest and most innovative of our time. Think Edison, think Ford, think Google. Today, a mere 16 years later, Google is an internet giant. It employs over 40,000 people, has a market cap of about $400 billion, offers a wide range of products, including its overwhelmingly popular search engine, YouTube, Chrome, Gmail, Android, smart glasses, the list goes on and on. It is a company, it's a search engine, and I expect it's the first brand name to be recognized as a verb by the American Dialect Society. Google is changing the way we think and the way we access and digest information, all while famously refusing to be evil. Our speakers today have been key participants in the growth of this business titan and have written a book, How Google Works, describing the lessons they learned along the way. Today, they will share with you some of the insights described in their book and give us an understanding of how they managed to deliver such extraordinary growth while maintaining a culture of innovation. Eric Schmidt is the executive chairman of Google. He started with Google in 2001 as its CEO and now is responsible for all external matters for the company, including building partnerships and broader business relationships, government outreach, and technology thought leadership. Eric is a member of the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology and the Prime Minister's Advisory Council in the UK. Jonathan Rosenberg joined Google in 2002 and managed the design and development of the company's consumer, advertising, and partner products for several years. He is currently an advisor to Google CEO Larry Page. Finally, serving as moderator today is Amanda Lang. Amanda is the senior business correspondent for CBC News. She also anchors the Lang and O'Lear exchange on CBC News Network. Thank you for joining us today. Over to you, Eric, Jonathan, and Amanda.
Thank you, Andrea. Eric, maybe before you sit down, I'm just going to ask you to show the room what's in your pocket.
My Android phone?
No, the other one.
My BlackBerry?
Yes.
Can we say, by the way, that we love Canadians?
And they've made us feel very much at home. We have hockey in San Jose, and I hear that national anthem about 12 times a year.
I think they're really impressive because they managed to avoid the 2008 financial crisis completely.
That was a good strategy.
You know what my role is here, right?
All I can tell you is it's like seriously impressive.
Hi. There are a lot of people here who want to hear from you, and I was joking, and I'll say it again because I've already offended the Empire Club with this line, but this is a particularly young and hip crowd for one of these lunches. So hands up, who in the room secretly wants a job at Google? You wrote the book, I mean, you describe in the book getting to Google. You were sort of the adult in the room with these two founders, and learning that everything you knew about leadership and management you had to toss out. What was the most important thing you wanted to share? Why, in other words, why did you feel like this was a book that needed to be written?
Well, when we talked about it, Jonathan had done this strategy work and had actually written sort of how we actually operated. And then one day we realized that this was actually just completely abnormal. And my first year, in the first month, I had a tiny little office. I was a CEO. And one day I walk in, and I have an office mate. And his name is Amit, and he's sitting right next to my desk. And I said, hello. And he says, hello, I'm Amit. And I said, well, why are you here? And he said, well, my office was next door, and there were 5 people in the office, and you're never here, so I just moved in. And at this moment, you have one of those moments like you have no idea what to say. Anything you say now is career limiting. right? Like, get out, or who are you, or whatever.
Right.
So we became best of friends and my office mate.
My first year was actually harder than Eric's because his problems were with an employee. My problems were with the founder, Larry. I was hired to run product management, and I'd spent 25 years learning how to do product management right, and I thought that's what I was hired for. So I spent the first 3 months writing the mother of all product plans, and it had Gantt charts and PERT charts and financial spreadsheets and all that stuff that they're supposed to have. And I dump it on Larry's desk, and he sort of pages through the table of contents, and he's like, no. And he asks me, have you ever produced a plan like this where the engineers put features in that weren't in your plan? And I said, well, no, they don't do that. And he said, well, have they ever built the product faster than in that pretty Gantt chart? And I said, no. He says, well, then it's stupid.
I forgot to tell you the story. So I decided to have an offsite because companies have offsite meetings. So we had an offsite around the corner from the company, and it starts at 10 because we start meetings late, and everyone shows up, including Larry. Sergey comes up an hour late, rollerblading to the meeting, which I thought was indicative. And we have a nice, presentation of what everyone was doing, which they were largely uninterested in because I think they already knew it. And then they ultimately said, I asked them to present their vision of the company. And they said, we just want to be a big company. And I said, well, how big? And they said, $100 billion. And I said, $100 billion of what? Market value or revenue? And they said, what's the difference? And I put my head like this, and I said, I can't take this anymore. I found out later that was their standard joke to torture people, and they very well understood the difference. Another day, I walked in to their office because they had an office together, and I said, what are we going to talk about today? And they said, we're going to talk about new manufacturing. I said, what kind of manufacturing? Refrigerators. So we spent 20 minutes talking about getting into the manufacturing of refrigerators and the benefit of automatic control of refrigerators. And at the end, I figured out it was an entire practical joke played on me. So this is what our book is about.
When they founded the company, the vision for this company was, and it was, as you say in the book, it came from a technical insight rather than some kind of product view. The vision was organize the world's information, which is a pretty lofty goal. You've gone beyond that. I mean, I think I said this to you earlier, and you said, oh, no, we want to do more than that. And I had to kind of keep from laughing, because more than that sounds impossible.
Well, I mean, self-driving cars.
What you say in the book is, given enough data and the ability to crunch it, we could solve virtually all of the problems that human beings face. Well,
I mean, as an example, I was doing some research for this year, and in 1964, Isaac Asimov in the New York World's Fair wrote his description of a fictional 2014 World's Fair. And it includes a one-paragraph description of autonomous self-driving vehicles. So people do imagine the future. If you listen carefully enough, we just have to figure out a way to build it. Now, to build a self-driving car, you have to have integrated circuits, you have to have knowledge, you have to have mapped all the roads, you have to have incredibly accurate lasers, and very good and very well-debugged software, which we have.
And if you want to continue to hire great people, you need to give them bigger and bigger problems to solve. And that's why we talk in the book about the potential for the power of information and the power of data. As you have more data and you can crunch it, you can come up with all sorts of insights that we previously haven't had. Just imagine, as we all move to wearable devices, the opportunities in healthcare, where we're longitudinally tracking physiological information about people, not only about individuals, which they can share with their doctor, but groups of people that we can use to assess broader healthcare trends and implications.
In fact, it's easy to get distracted and think you guys are creating cool new products, the driverless car, Google Glass. What you're actually doing is creating a bunch of things that manage data in different ways. You stay pretty true to the idea that what you will do is organize data so that we can use it in some way that we find useful.
There's an explosion in data, and there are many estimates, but it's rough summaries that in a couple of days we produce as much data now as was produced between the dawn of civilization in roughly the 1960s. Right, so this explosion is very, very real. Everyone in this room will be affected by this in lots of ways. the businesses, the way you live, the way you operate, and it can be used to make things much, much better.
Yeah. And I think that explosion has big career implications. You know, Bill Gates says that he went into software because he realized that the price of computing was coming down. Similarly, if you think about data, as data becomes ubiquitous and free, the complementary scarce resources, an economist would say, is the ability to analyze the data. So from a career standpoint, I would become a statistician if I were coming out of school today.
The dark side of that beautiful thing, of all the great stuff you're going to help us do, is all of the stuff you'll know about us. And everything that you put in front of us and every new iteration to your algorithm actually takes you deeper and deeper, right down to artificial intelligence, into what we want, what we think. At the end of the day, you use that to make money. You sell ads. Is there a sinister side to that?
Well, we're careful to state what we do, and we're also careful to give you the tools to delete that information. And we're careful to protect ourselves from the attacks from people like the NSA and the Chinese by using complicated and powerful encryption. So I can tell you right now that the safest place to put your data is in Google.
And that you won't use this information against us in any way at any time?
The answer is we will not.
The goal is to help you use the information, to help you make better decisions, to help you live a better life.
Yeah.
Look at some of the modest things that we do with Google Now already today. Google Now has warned me of traffic implications for some of the events that we'd been going to proactively, telling me things that I wouldn't have otherwise known to ask.
In a few years, you'll be in bed, and you'll be woken up by one of these REM sleepers that figures out the correct time of your REM sleep to wake you with the most alertness. And you'll look at the wall, and you'll say, do I need to get up? And the wall is going to look back and say, no. And the reason it says no is that your boss is 15 minutes late and doesn't really care, and there's no crises today. And in any case, the transit will be faster, and if you leave in exactly 21 minutes, you'll get there at the same time. Will you use that product? You betcha, you want the sleep.
Does Google want to replace our brain?
No.
I think Google wants...
The answer is no.
Is there...
I want to enhance our brain. So...
Please continue.
Well, now I'm stuck. How am I going to enhance the brain? I guess the example that I would give is, if you look at...
She said replace.
Well, I'm going to say, you taught me that you can change the question a little bit and then give a different answer.
Please continue.
You just did that yesterday on live TV, and I blew it. So
it's been like this for 13 years, don't worry.
We had a book party in New York yesterday, and I was talking to Gary Kasparov. And one of the things that I think is fascinating is we all thought chess was going to be boring because 10 years ago, Deep Blue and computers got better at chess. And it seemed like the game was dead. Turns out that we've run some tests, and humans guiding 3 mediocre chess programs can actually beat the best supercomputer playing a chess program. So I think the implications that we see there are opportunities for software and Google and computers in general to enhance our brains.
So one way to understand what Google has done is we've made the world collectively more intelligent because the world collectively has more access to information that used to be harder to get. The question is, how far can we take that? How much additional can we make your reasoning? How much smarter can we make you? And we all believe, and part of our goal, is to go from just answering the query to being able to actually answer the question, like, what's a better choice, A or B? What's the history here? What should I really be worried about here? And we're getting close to that over the next 5 or 10 years. And one of the most interesting things about Canada is that 2 of the leading centers for this kind of general intelligence are in Toronto and Montreal.
That stuff is very cool, and you can understand why people that work in your world are fascinated with machine learning and neural networks, and you can see the potential for it to do great things. But to the extent that technology is already making us stupid, a whole generation that can't spell.
I disagree with this.
I worry that
continue.
if I rely on my phone to tell me whether I should go on go on vacation in Hawaii or San Francisco, I'm losing something as a human being.
Well, I mean, we can always appeal to the romantic past, but the fact of the matter is, people, remember the whole bowling alone thing? That 20 years ago everyone was going to be bowling alone and we'd all be isolated? Completely false, right? What do people do today? Text pictures of themselves. Text pictures of their friends. Text. What are we doing for dinner? Right? That's called communications, right? And it may be misspelled, but frankly, the spell check is pretty good. Okay? So we are communicative, experiential, social animals. The collective intelligence that has been brought by this connectivity is of enormous value to the humans.
I think it also depends on how you define intelligence. If you define intelligence as the ability to spell, or the ability to do rote learning, or the ability to memorize things, then I think we may be getting dumber. But if you define it as the ability to do a better job in an interview, I'm sure you're much better prepared to be here with us today because of Google than you would have been 20 years ago.
When I was in high school,
she agrees with me. She's nodding. Eric's shaking his head, but she's nodding. I'm winning.
I once had to do a story about Google being down, and I sat down at my computer, and the first thing I did was try to Google it. That was a long time ago.
So when I was in middle school in Virginia, one of the requirements was that we memorize the 50 counties' names of Virginia. Now, that was a complete waste of time, right? It would have been much better, since I don't even live there anymore, it would have been much better to today learn how to reason, think, search, and use these tools. Because we're not going to go back in time to no access to this kind of information. And in fact, one of the major challenges, I think, for societies, Canada, the United States, and so forth, is what does the educational system look like to produce the kind of people that will ultimately work at Google? One of the things that we talk about at some length is who are those people and why are they important and why are they rare? Right? So part of our goal is to make sure that people are organizing their human systems to generate these people.
There is, though, a growing awareness, thanks to Julian Assange and Edward Snowden, that our data, it doesn't seem particularly private, can be used against us in a variety of ways. It struck me, thinking about how powerful Google is and the amount of information you have, you could probably fight terrorism better than the NSA. So why don't you?
It's illegal. There are many, many, many laws in the United States and elsewhere that limit what we can do. We are served by legitimate subpoenas as opposed to random walks through our servers, which we do honor. And that's probably all I should say about it.
All right.
It turns out I discovered, when we were first attacked, I discovered that it's illegal for American firms to fight foreign governments. It's kind of a reasonable rule, by the way.
Where do you see your company going? And I guess by that I mean, you're thinking artificial intelligence, you're thinking mobile dominated. How deep into our lives can Google get?
Well, I think it's pretty fascinating when you just think about what these smartphones can do today. I used to have a Rolodex. I used to have an address book. I used to have an answering machine. I used to check the yellow pages. I used to check the weather. All of these things, I used to have a camera. All of these things have been replaced by my smartphone. And the fascinating thing is I had access to all of these things. If you think about the rate at which people are adopting mobile phones and the prices of phones are falling, in the next 5 years we'll have 2.5 billion additional people in the third world using smartphones. And imagine how different their experience is going to be. Many of them may have never had access to a library. They may have never had access to the information that their government shares. These people are going to be running a completely new set of searches. How to build a well, symptoms related to healthcare, sending pictures to doctors. So I think we're going to see a huge transition as we move to phones moving to other places throughout the world, and we're going to connect all of them. We've got this balloon project with Google X. In the third world, we've got faster connectivity to homes in the first world. So fundamentally, everyone's going to get connected, everyone's going to participate, and most of them are going to do it on mobile devices.
You did an event this morning that I witnessed with some kids, and I think a 9-year-old asked you this question that I thought was a pretty great question, which was, I'm going to get the phrasing right, I hope. What is the most super secret thing you're working on?
Putting me in his pocket. Do you have the little thing?
This 9-year-old produced on a 3D imager with a 3D reality a little picture of me, right? It's just shocking how smart these 9-year-old Canadians are.
I'm about to open it up to questions. If you want to ask a question, please stand so that the mic runners can see you, and they will come to you. And when I see a mic runner with you, I will come out to you. What is the company you worry most about from a competitive point of view?
I've said for years that there are 4 sort of major platform companies in the world today. Apple, Google, Facebook, and Amazon. Each of which are large global platforms. They're well-funded. They have strong cultures, strong brands, happy customers, et cetera, et cetera. In our industry, we've never seen 4 running as hard as those 4 are. And I think the competitiveness between them is the roughest I have ever seen. And that competition benefits all of you in terms of incredibly rapidly declining phone prices, essentially free services of one kind or another. So we always worry about a new startup, but I think we worry about both the sort of scale of those platforms because they're moving so quickly and the scale with which these new platforms can emerge. So it's a tough but incredibly dynamic business.
Anything to add?
I continue to differ on some things, but I would say...
Do you agree with me or you disagree with me?
Well, I agree with you about those companies, but I would say it's the kids we met today holding a copy of this book.
Thank goodness they're only 9.
In a dorm. Some of the counselors were older.
Yeah, well, they were employed teaching the kids, thank goodness.
Yes, but they're sitting there reading our book. They're in a dorm room. They're in a garage somewhere.
Yeah. Actually, the last paragraph of the book says that these questions are always framed as a fear of the garage. We welcome it.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's roughly.
So we've got a question here, but I just want to ask you. You wrote the book. It is about employees. It's clearly you think that if you get the people right, everything else follows.
Sure.
Just give me a quick insight into how somebody who doesn't run a high-tech firm, who can't have smart creatives, who can't give people 20% of their time to go, freebase ideas, somebody who runs a manufacturing shop, what can they learn from you?
Well, they could start hiring better tomorrow. I think hiring is something that we talk a lot in the book about how many managers don't spend the time they should on hiring. They delegate hiring to recruiting. They get an open head count, and then suddenly urgency of filling the head count seems more important than making sure they get the right person right. So I think that's easy to fix. We talk a lot in the book about how to run a good decision-making process, much of which I think can be copied.
Well, we have the 9 rules for email and the 10 rules
Everybody turns we didn't number it, but everybody sort of seems to turn the things that we produce into 10 ways to make your life better, 10 ways to run a meeting, according to Eric Schmidt, 10 ways to do your email. You can certainly follow that advice, but the biggest area that I think most companies can do is, even if you don't think you're hiring the smartest, best creatives, be much more transparent about the information that you share with them. You're not going to find the junior person who has a brilliant idea if you're not engaged with them and if you're not sharing the information and the big problems of the company with them. And today, that's easy.
I would make it even stronger. I think the vast majority of businesses are hiring lots of people because there's natural turnover, right? They need to communicate more. They need to make crisper decision-making. They need to have 5-year strategies, and they need to be battle-tested in terms of the quality of their strategies. All of those are applicable to every business, and by the way, every government and every institution.
All right, let's go to a question over here. Yep.
I've got a question about the effect of Google on the Canadian media ecosystem. With your tremendous growth, we've now reached a stage in Canada where virtually every traditional media channel, newspapers, radio, television, is seeing year-over-year revenue declines as you have grown to be such a large share of the advertising pie. In Canada, we tax media companies twice. One, we tell them how much money they should be spending on Canadian content, and 2, we have transparency in terms of their corporate income tax. Could you just address the question about the reinvestment in our community with the advertising dollars that you're now taking from it?
You're to blame, apparently.
So we have at least 700 employees in Canada, and we fund an ecosystem of at least 100,000 small and medium businesses that use our services in various interesting ways. If you add up all of that amount of money, it's a very large amount of money, which is not the same thing as the kind of money that you're asking about. So the benefit to Canada of Google, I would argue, is quite significant. I'm very sensitive to this issue because we need the non-Google broadcasting and media industries to be successful. And we spent quite a bit of time trying to build tools that will help monetize as consumers move to the web. So we have product after product that allows you to monetize, whether it's a subscription service or whether it's a free advertising service. And that's ultimately, I think, the best solution, which is to help those partners make money. And I think the money can be made.
Because you need us to continue to survive for some of your products to work.
Well, we need the media to survive because it's an essential part of democracy. I've now spent lots of time in countries that don't have this, and trust me, we really need these people.
Yeah.
Right.
As annoying as we are. Yes, at the back.
I was just wondering, looking into the future with the hiring of Ray Kurzweil, you mentioned that a human can beat a computer at chess with help from a computer. Is singularity on the product roadmap for Google? And if so, when can we expect it?
And which year, Jonathan?
Right.
Well, you've always told me that I can't imagine the unimaginable more than 5 years in advance, but I underestimate everything that can be done in the long run and overestimate everything that can be done in the short run. So I'm going to say 5 years. Because you can't prove that that's wrong.
The question was, when will the singularity occur? And you're saying 5 years?
Before I die. How about before we die?
That's a better answer.
That's a better.
But artificial intelligence is very much on your roadmap.
Yes. This serious answer about Ray is working on some new, very innovative products. Google is not planning to have the singularity occur anytime soon.
Do we have any questions? Yep.
Now that Apple has played some of its cards in the payment space, what's Google's plan for payments, and then specifically, checkout, wallet, HCE?
I think we've had all those products in Android for a year, roughly.
We have. And I think we're going to continue to see people consummating transactions on phones. I think that's probably the most significant shift that we're going to see in the next several years. The main reason that phones haven't been monetizing as well from a cost per click standpoint is because there's not as much commerce being done on them. So I think as people start adopting phones more and as it becomes easier to buy things on phones, we're going to see a lot more commerce on phones. So we'll both be offering services in that area.
I think we all benefit from the transition to more immediate purchasing. So Android phones have had NFC support, which is the actual way in which these things signal to each other, around for at least 4 years, because I remember announcing it. And so we've had this stuff for a while, and I think Apple's move will accelerate that transformation. And from your perspective as consumers, it means that when you walk into a store, the whole thing is seamless. One of the sort of fantasies is eventually, you're driving down the street, and I say to the phone, I need a new pair of jeans, and it says, well, I already know your size, and the one on the left is the brand you like, and the one on the right is for sale. Which one do you want to do? And when I turn left or right, the pants are already ready, and they're ready for them to hand me, which I then purchase. The velocity of that transaction both increases the size of the market, which is obviously of interest to the merchants, but it also gives you free time to spend, frankly, less time pants shopping.
Cybersecurity is a growing issue, and I know you guys are thinking a lot about it, optimizing search results based on the security of the site, et cetera. But are you doing product? Is that a kind of a serious R&D piece of the puzzle? Because one impediment to that speed of transaction is that we may be wary of actually putting our data out there.
Well, we work, again, the examples that you used, none of them involved Google. We have worked very, very hard.
Are you not planning to optimize search results based on the security of the page? Did I make that up?
Yeah, that's not quite what we're doing.
Okay.
We definitely warn people when we know that there's malware or some type of a problem.
There's the negative side. There's the negative side, which is that if there's any malware nearby,
yes,
we now detect that and warn you, which is why people should be using the Chrome browser. by the way, which is, by the way, free, so we're clear. But Chrome really does help solve that problem. There's a lot of conversations about the use of HTTPS versus HTTP and those aspects, which are somewhat technical. But fundamentally, we're pushing hard to make the entire transaction encrypted and secure after it leaves the Google premises. The Google stuff is already very secure.
We have a question out here.
How long until autonomous cars become the dominant form of transportation, in your opinion?
5 years. I've been in one of these cars, and I would say I've driven one, but that really isn't true. I've been driven by one. And for about the first 20 minutes, you find yourself sitting in the passenger seat, pushing the imaginary brake that you pushed when you taught your 15-year-old to drive. And then after 20 minutes, you kind of just get used to it. And you realize that the laser of the car can see better than you and can react faster than you. So I think at this point, the challenge is less in the technology. The technology actually works really well. And it's more in the regulations, in the issues of these cars interacting with human drivers, which is actually more problematic than the cars interacting with robot drivers. But we're definitely going to be doing tests this year, and in the next several years, something like 5+ years, I think you'll see more scenarios where these get deployed.
Yes, here.
How will the unions fare in a universe that tends to encourage creative thinking?
How do the
unions? How will the unions fare in a universe that tends to?
Which kinds of unions?
Well, generally.
Government unions, public unions, private unions, corporate unions. You're referring to the union structures that I'm familiar with.
Well, the unions tend to accept the thinking of the leadership.
Well, a general observation about unions is that the leaders of the unions tend to respond, at least in the American model that I'm familiar with, they respond to the current concerns of the current union members because they're elected. So they run and they're elected, at least as I understand it, by plebiscite, majority vote, and so forth. So they're going to optimize the interests of that particular set of workers. And so the conflict occurs when something disruptive comes along, which is not in the specific interest of the workers. And we've seen this in numerous cases in America. I'm not as familiar with in Canada, but certainly with education, where there are new modalities and the unions resist their adoption. And I don't think that's good.
We have a question on this side of the room. Yep.
So actually, I have a question about education. You were talking about some of the things that were taught to you when you were a student in middle school that really weren't very relevant. And you're also talking about looking for certain qualities in people that you hire to work at Google. So in your opinion, what would be the most important reform that could be made, not at the university level, but in the pre-university level in education, to make the young people coming out of the education system not just better Google employees, but also better citizens?
Help them have more fun. Don't torture them like Eric was tortured with rote memorizing. Give them tasks like the kind of things that we saw this morning, tasks that are more creative, tasks that kids will get passionate about. I would argue that a kid getting passionate about anything is good. I was passionate about baseball cards. That's how I actually learned to memorize stuff when I was a kid. My parents were worried about it. I think I turned out okay. So I would focus on getting them excited about learning in a less rote-oriented way.
Okay.
I'll leave it at that. I agree with that.
I think our last question is out here.
Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Despite all the accolades for Canada's business climate, a whole host of indices and metrics have shown that we're lagging behind other G7 and G20 countries in terms of innovation. So my question to you is, how do you continue to justify Google X's focus on shoot-the-moon solutions with risk-averse shareholders, and what lessons can the Canadian businesses learn from Google?
Well, from what I've seen, I think what's impressive about the Canadian opportunity is that you're much better connected than most other well-developed nations. You've got great broadband connectivity. 3 out of 4 Canadians have a smartphone. Some 90% of them access the internet on a daily basis from their phone. So I think the good news for you guys is that you have the infrastructure. What's surprising when you look at the Canadian data is that with all that infrastructure, the level of e-commerce that you have is relatively low for the connectivity that you have. So what you could learn from the Google model, I would suggest, is this notion of thinking 10x, this notion of making it okay to fail, this notion of a much more engineering-driven mentality of iterating much more quickly and focusing on the kind of dynamics of setting big goals and making it okay if you miss them and accepting the things that you learn from them. Because you have the infrastructure and you certainly have talented engineers and talented people.
I agree with all that. I think that Canada is, if anything, undershooting the opportunity that Canada has. You have the people, you have the connectivity. I think you have the funding coming now. It's right in front of you if you focus on it. On your question for the shareholders, I'll tell you a story that illustrates this. As we do a number of things in Google X, but one is we developed a contact lens. And this is a contact lens that has a computer chip inside the lens with a tiny battery. And this little computer detects changes in your vitreous, essentially the part of your eye, that indicates your insulin level. And it changes color in such a way that people who have diabetes or near diabetes can use this rather than doing the pinprick. This single invention will improve the lives of hundreds of millions of people for decades and will produce an enormous amount of royalty out of a 20-person engineering team. So the way we've organized Google X is every once in a while we're going to hit a multi-billion-dollar business that happens to make the world better for billions of people. We're very proud of it.
I have a quick story on that which sort of gets to some of these moonshots and just how Google thinks about adding shareholder value. When we first looked at Keyhole, which was actually the company that became Google Earth, I went over there with one of our senior VPs, Jeff Huber, and we saw this first version of Google Earth like 8-9 years ago. And it was really exciting, and I thought, well, I need to go back to Google and get somebody excited about it. So we went back to Google, and we took Sergey over. And Sergey goes, and he sees Google Earth, and he's like, well, this looks really cool. We need to buy this company. So I advocated with Sergey to buy the company, and Eric did what he was supposed to. He said, well, we need the board to give us approval. So we got buying Keyhole onto the next board meeting presentation, and we get in the meeting, and I'm sort of excited to talk about Keyhole, and Sergey decides he's going to talk about it because he's now seen it, and he wants to be the advocate for it. And so he explains how cool this is, and like he demos it, and everybody's like, yeah, it's really cool. And so then one of the board members says, okay, well, maybe we should approve this, but how are we going to make money? And I'd been drinking the Google Kool-Aid. I'd had my lecture from Larry a year earlier, like, you know, we didn't project all of that stuff, so I'm not sure what to say. And Sergey says, well, Jonathan's the business person. And so then I'm sitting there in front of the board. I have no idea what to say, and Eric kind of charitably bails me out. I'm like a deer in headlights, and he says, this is a founder-led decision on this acquisition. And I was like, nice. Yeah, you're right. So we bought Keyhole, and now that's Google Maps.
And by local. The way, by the way, I didn't even bother to visit these guys because I didn't think it was that important. Today, that acquisition is the basis of Google Maps and everything we do, multi-billion-dollar business for Google.
And you couldn't do the Google car without it, right?
Of course.
Couldn't, sure.
So my last question is for Eric. Are you still sharing your office with Amit?
No, in fact, Amit retired. I think he was tired of listening in on my conversations.
Please join me in thanking Jonathan
Thank you all.
and Eric.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Noble Shumar, Empire Club past president, to thank our guests.
Thank you, Andrea, and thank you, Eric and Jonathan. On behalf of the Empire Club of Canada, we'd like to present you our iconic Red Book. Every one of our speeches over the past 111 years have been transcribed and put into a book and sent to every library and every consulate, Canadian embassy around the world. So if you Google yourselves tomorrow, you'll be able to find yourselves on our website as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
And also, I'm pleased to present you with our singer this afternoon. Shane Phillips has his new CD, and I'd like to present you one of those as well.
Much.
He's looking for funding. And finally, on every book tour, if you're trying to make a billionaire happy, it's not very easy financially, but I'm pleased to let you know that IBK Capital has purchased all the books in this room, and I just heard that Amar Varma from Pivotal Labs has just purchased, or is going to purchase today now that I'm announcing it, 300 more books for everyone at Pivotal Labs.
Thank you all, and every book counts. We're busy selling books. So thank you so much.
Just a little bit longer before lunch. Bear with me. I'll now present our door prize. Our winner today will be one of the first in Canada to have a Samsung Gear Live. I'd like to ask Jenna Hay to bring the box of business cards to the stage, and I'll draw the winner. Without looking. It's Minea C. Moldovino, Director Desautol Center for Integrative Thinking at the Rotman School of Management. Please see Jenna after the lunch, and she'll give you your... just one quick word. Jenna is the Public Relations and Events Manager of the Empire Club, and this week is her last week with us, and we're going to miss her terribly. So Jenna, on behalf of the board, I just wanted to say thank you for your hard work and your dedication to the Empire Club. Thank you. So thank you very much to our generous sponsors. You've heard that IBK Capital has purchased some books. They're also our event sponsor today. Engagement Labs, thank you. Pivotal Labs, thank you. Our VIP reception sponsor is Skadden Arps, Slate, Mar, and Flom. Thank you. I'd also like to thank the National Post as our print media sponsor, and Van Valkenburg for providing our AV. You can follow us on Twitter at empire_club and visit us online at www.empireclub.org. Thank you all for coming. We hope to see you again soon at some of the exciting upcoming events described in the brochure at your table, including on October 15th. We have the president of the first Bitcoin currency exchange in Canada. So please enjoy your lunch, and thank you for coming.